This is the Independent News Service, and now commentary by John Robles. Thanks for joining us. The humanitarian situation in Novorossiya and in the Donbass continues to escalate out of control and has long ago passed the level of being what experts and human rights workers would call a humanitarian catastrophe. On the one-year anniversary of the start of the tragic events on the Maidan Square, which led to the overthrow of the democratically elected president and the installation of a Western-backed fascist regime, the situation for the civilian populations of the country, in particular the ethnic Russians and Russian-speaking populations of the Donbass, has grown so dire that many are beginning to recall the siege of Leningrad by the Nazis, and many more are sure that the situation will only worsen as winter tightens its frozen grip on the region. Looking back at the real situation that existed over a year ago and comparing it with the current state of affairs, one can only come to the conclusion that the fascists who seize power have as their only goal the destruction of all parts of Ukraine that do not agree with their illegal rise to power, and, as directed by the West, the destruction of the Russian-speaking populations of the country. A year ago, there were social problems in the country, and the majority of the population was displeased with the activities of those in power and with the standard of living that existed for most Ukrainians. But those problems pale in comparison with what the Western-backed Nazi extremists and fascists have unleashed all over Ukraine. Would the people who came out in the streets and supported the false hope of European Union integration, had they known at the time the death and suffering and literal genocide that they were helping to unleash, have so energetically and with such abandon and fervor allowed their own democratically elected government to be overthrown? Had the quiet people of Ukraine known that their silence, when mass murderer Stepan Bandera was allowed to be made a hero of Ukraine, was aiding the violent fascists to achieve power, would they have been so tolerant? Would those who bought all of the U.S. lies of democracy and a better future once the fascists were allowed to take over the houses of government and the seats of power have been so silent in their collusion? Had they known the Banderavites would start a punitive war of extermination on all of those who opposed them and literally sell out their country to the highest bidder? The silence and tolerance that the good people of Ukraine have shown the brutal Nazi thugs has allowed them to make a mockery of the Ukrainian constitution, has allowed them to kill with impunity as well, and turn all precepts of civilization on their head, and now it is too late to speak out, to prevent blood that has already been shed. The bloodshed can only be stopped by force now, for it is clear that you cannot negotiate with armed fascists, whose only goal is the complete annihilation of your people. On the one-year anniversary of the tragic events on the Maidan and the eve of the celebration of the genocide, that is, the U.S. holiday of Thanksgiving, I am reminded of the genocide waged on my own people, the Taino Indians, by the same forces that are today bent on exterminating Russians and destroying the Russian world. I am reminded and sickened and know that there is little I can do by myself to stop them, but, as is my way, I refuse to be silent, and stop them we must. As always, I refuse to put a nice spin on or soften the language, so as not to offend. I call things as they are and try to deliver the truth to my readers, or my viewers. It is my promise and responsibility, and I take it seriously. I say this because forces have also infiltrated the Russian media, who are apologetic to the forces trying to destroy Russia and refuse to call them out. If you are one of my regular readers or viewers, you know which certain media outlets have joined the silent collusion with the Nazis while paying lip service to being honest, championing the truth, and calling things what they are. As a Native American in my adopted Russia, I'm disgusted by the fact that there are those who would celebrate the Maidan tragedy, and mortified that they are the same forces, or being mentored by those forces that committed genocide on my people. I have always stood by the contention that a country that was founded on stolen lands that were obtained through genocide can never in any way be just, or fair, or democratic, and that the underlying violence and foundation of genocide is something that no matter how much it is hidden, and as long as it is never addressed and come to terms with, will always have a dark and evil influence on the American psyche. Add to this the endemic racism that was the product of the same countries stolen by genocide, being built and developed in the beginning by slaves who'd been stolen from their homes on the other side of the world, and it becomes a mix that was the envy of people like Adolf Hitler. For the native people, as happens every year, this period of Thanksgiving is a period of mourning for the lost lives of millions upon millions of our kind who were exterminated. Every year I try to get the message out, and every year I manage to reach a few good souls, but the majority remain indifferent and are not interested in the truth. This year, with the developments in Ukraine and the way that the U.S. unleashed and then brought to power Nazis in Europe, coupled with the ongoing extermination of Muslims and now the genocide being wrought on Russians in the Donbass, the disgusting criminal nature of the United States and their allies has grown to the point where even for the most tolerant, it cannot be ignored any longer. Thanksgiving is in fact a day of shame. The reality of the holiday is that the native people welcome the white man from overseas, and on the day that is celebrated, a huge feast was held for the foreigners as a sign of peace. Historical accounts from Indian historians and alternative sources of the original Thanksgiving paint a far different picture than that which is presented to the American people in their textbooks and in the media. Yes, there was a large feast, and yes, the Indians shared everything they had with the drunken, unwashed invaders who were starving, but it was not a happy event for the Indians at least. According to Mi'kmaq elder Dr. Daniel Paul, a historian, all of the Indians who took part in the original feast were slaughtered. The women and children were raped and murdered, and then the heads of the men who had been killed were placed on stakes and displayed in various locations as a warning to any Indians who might dare to stand up. Thus, the true nature of Thanksgiving is to give thanks that the indigenous people were so easy to exterminate and the lands so easy to steal. There can be no pride or joy in genocide for normal people, but this is one of the specifics of the American psyche. So, on the occasion of Thanksgiving, I say, shame on America for celebrating genocide and the stealing of Indian lands. But that is far from being all that America has to be ashamed of as we mark this horrible event. From the genocide of the Indians and horrors meted out on the slaves to the inspiration and support given to Adolf Hitler as he set about committing genocide on the Jews, American history is full of deep, dark secrets and events that it must be ashamed of. But in the interest of being reasonably brief, let us look at the situation in Ukraine and in recent history. I don't want to be sanctimonious or unfair, but there is truly and really a time when enough is enough, when the crimes and horrors become too much for the civilized person to bear, and when it is no longer possible to ignore and brush under the carpet or obfuscate the horrors, and they must finally be addressed. We can start this list of shame, if you'd like to call it that, with the greatest shame in recent history, and one that has made all of the death and destruction that we have seen since that event possible. Shame on you, America, for allowing the office of the President of the United States to be stolen on November 7th, 2000, and for allowing the rise to power of the most criminal president and administration in U.S. history. Shame on you, America, and the American people for allowing your Constitution and your government to be taken over by homicidal criminals. Shame on you, America, for never properly investigating 9/11 or bringing anyone to justice, and for ignoring the truth. And shame on you for covering up the events and profiting off of the lives of almost 3,000 people who died on September 11th, 2001. Shame on you, America, for never punishing President Bush or his successor and their administrations for the crimes they've committed against you, the American people, and against the entire world. Crimes ranging from torture, to wars of aggression, to extrajudicial execution, to genocide, to almost every imaginable violation of the Constitution of the U.S. and the Geneva Conventions and human rights. Shame on you, America, for launching wars of aggression against the people of Afghanistan, and then against the people of Iraq, and then Libya and Syria, and now, through your proxies, Ukraine. Shame on you for transferring the blame for these attacks on the people you slaughtered in the millions, as you lied to the world that these wars were launched for humanitarian reasons. Shame on you, America, for terrorizing and prosecuting and imprisoning and killing journalists and anyone who has attempted to expose the truth or your illegality. Shame on you also for turning the United States into a hyper-security state run by corporations. Shame on you for launching a war on Muslims and for the millions of Iraqis and other Muslims you have slaughtered since 9/11. Shame on you, America, for first bringing Al-Qaeda into power and then for pretending that they are responsible for all the death and destruction that you yourselves are causing. Shame on you, America, for all the leaders and countries you've destroyed, but even more pressing and closer to home is the destruction of Ukraine and your targeting of Russia for total destruction as well. In this, also shame on you for thinking and believing that all of the resources in the world are yours and that you can take them from wherever you like and from whomever you like. As for Ukraine and Maidan, shame on you, America, for training, funding, and arming fascists and homicidal maniacs in order to bring about a regime change, and then for unleashing Nazis in Europe in the year 2014. Shame on you, America, for overthrowing a democratically elected government in Europe and for installing a junta of fascists who are committing genocide on the peoples of their own country. Shame on you, America, for never questioning and never calling for investigations into the illegal activities of the CIA, USAID, and other officials in Ukraine, and in fact all over the world. Shame on you, America, for allowing the military-industrial complex, the bankers, and huge energy concerns to take over your democracy and enslave your own people in a hyper-security state established to protect you from non-existent threats. Shame on those in the U.S. and in Ukraine celebrating the tragic events on the Maidan and the brutal murder of Berkut officers and others as they attempted to protect the state and the people from Nazi marauders and thugs. Shame on you, America, for attempting to blame Russia for your own orchestrated coup and for then dictating to Russia the terms and conditions you want her to follow. Shame on you, America, for instigating and backing the genocide of the Russian population in Ukraine, and then for interfering with and not allowing these peaceful civilians to defend themselves or be defended. Shame on you, America, for filling your coffers with stolen Russian assets, and for the sanctions you waged against Russia for a conflict and a coup Russia had absolutely nothing to do with. Shame on you, America, for promises to lift those same illegal sanctions when Russia fulfills your conditions. Shame on you for silencing the press and allowing journalists to be killed, and in fact for treating journalists as terrorists for attempting to report the truth. Shame on you, America, for silencing dissent within your own borders, and in fact worldwide, when it involves your illegality or goes against your narrative. Shame on you, America, for overthrowing yet another democratically elected government and for now targeting Russia with the same treatment again. Shame on you, America, for supporting genocide and supplying funding and weapons for it in the Donbass and worldwide, and for slaughtering 426 children in Latakia, Syria last year in a failed pretext for more war. Shame on you, America, for supporting Ukrainian criminals, for ignoring and stealing billions of dollars worth of Russian gas. Shame on you, America, and your Ukrainian agents for downing a civilian Malaysian passenger jet as yet another failed pretext for war. Shame on you, America, for constantly blaming Russia for these events and more, and for never providing proof for your allegations. Shame on you, America, for deceiving and lying to the American people, the Ukrainian people, and all citizens of the world. Shame on you, America, and Kiev for causing the violent overthrow of an elected government and dehumanizing the Russian population to facilitate their extermination, and for the events in Odessa and in Mariupol and elsewhere where your proxies and agents have slaughtered hundreds. Shame on you, America, for refusing to investigate the horrific crimes being carried out by your Nazis, including the use of prohibited munitions and the slaughter, and continuing slaughter, of unarmed civilians. Shame on you, America, for advising your junta to destroy all of the infrastructure in Donbass so that the area becomes unlivable and the people leave, and for forbidding the delivery of medicine, humanitarian aid, and bringing about the starvation of the population. Shame on you, Kiev, for selling out Ukraine and your own people, for becoming or attempting to become a U.S. client and material donor, and allowing the U.S. and the CIA to run rampant in your country as they destroy it as a launching pad for World War III against Russia. Shame on you, America, for demonizing President Putin when he's trying to build a democracy and improve the lives of his people and his country. Shame on you, America, for attempting to demonize this fine leader because he has the audacity to be independent of you and all of your self-serving, nefarious policies. Shame on you, America, for bringing only death, destruction, exploitation, and enslavement to every country you show interest in or attempt to spread democracy to. And finally, shame on you, America, for attempting to bring the shameful celebration of Indian genocide called Thanksgiving to the people of Ukraine. This is the Independent News Service. My name is John Robles. That was commentary from myself. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we wish you the best.